dude, I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. We're sitting down with my main man, Cody Martin. Here we are. Yay. We're going to start diving into, look, we're at this point in the season, huh, Cody? We've been talking about, first off, now we got the journey of the hitter, right? All the things didn't count before this. And then, all the, I'm the worst hitter in the world. I'm the best hitter in the world. I'm the worst hitter in the world. I'm the best hitter in the world. All of those things in between. And then also, too, we're going to talk through some of the fallacies of what the work looks like, even when you have, hitting coaches, strength coaches, pitching, all the coaches and training and all the things you put into it. And I'm sure we'll add some, things from like our experience along the way too. But again, more so, we kind of wanted to dive into some of that. So hope y'all having a good day. We're over here on a Friday. I don't know when it'll be when you listening to this bad boy, but you know what I'm saying? But we're coming with that Friday energy, so here we are. But yeah, I mean, the first thing that we were kind of talking about is really the understanding. I think one of the cool things about being where we've had the privilege, and I'm specifically using that word because it's something that I've had to reframe in my head too as well. We have the privilege where people believe that if a hitter's hitting with us, they better stroke. They better just crush all the time, they never struggle, any of the things, right? But we also talk about that from the beginning is usually hitters are coming to us because they have struggled, right? And now when we come into performance, and one of the things that we talk about this part about all the time is performance obviously is not just physical things, right? It's not just the swing. Oh man, you know what? This guy just needs a couple cues and all of a sudden he might crush, right? Like he could maybe, but usually if they've struggled that bad, by the time they get to us, why would that be the case, right? Is because if it was something so easy, usually a lot of other people could handle it, right? Like we've talked about it like as before as we're almost more of, we get like specialty cases. I kind of almost, I used to tell you this a couple years ago. I used to watch that show, House, which again, if you guys haven't watched that TV show is, House is like, he was a specialty doctor that only really handled like extreme cases because most other doctors had a problem. They all would diagnose something different. And then he would be the specialty doctor that would figure out these little nuances of what was actually going on in their life. And also too, even in his circumstances, it isn't always like physical. You know what? There's this crazy thing going on. Sometimes there was something else going on behind the scenes. Like maybe they were taking some type of vitamin, quote unquote, that was actually had some other things in it and was causing their body to have these adverse reactions to it, or et cetera. And so sometimes he would have to go into their life and figure out what was going on that was causing, these health crises in their life. And so when we look at performance, obviously performance is not just, the skill of hitting. Sometimes it's the skill of hitting. Sometimes there is some physical limitations or even to restrictions that they're having to overcome that we're working with as well. Obviously, you got the whole mental side. You have the spiritual side. You have all these other things and these dynamics that you bring in that actually lead into performance, right? And so when we have athletes that come in, usually on that same side, they've usually already worked with a number of hitting coaches, including their field coach, and also let's say their team coach. A lot of times too, we get referrals from those coaches for their player to come and train with us. And who would have thought when they get here, a lot of times my feedback to their coaches is like, hey, I get why you were struggling with them because they have some really crazy asymmetries, or they have some really, maybe there's some real, some things going on upstairs and how they're talking to themselves and how they're processing and how, there's something going on with them being a hitter, right? Even if they have all the skill sets, even if they have all the physical capabilities, even if they have all those other things, there's obviously other parts of performance that a lot of times, even when we're coaching, is more holistic in that way, is that we have to take in as much of the picture as we can and gain as much information as we can and get to know the hitter so that we can actually understand what's the best thing and what's the lowest hanging fruit for how we can help them. So I say all that to say with this as well is we're just like any other coach, though, at the same time, is that when hitters come to us, no, again, not every single hitter, the next 2 months from now, they're going to be the greatest hitter on the planet, right? Like that's just not realistic. At the end of the day, some of the things that they're struggling with, especially if it's not just something simple, which usually it's not if they're here, right? Is it might take time to work themselves out. Like let's say they have a massive asymmetry in their body. We might be able to reposition them in the box. We might be able to do this. We might be able to do that, right? And help them Band-Aid some things for now while we work on the main issue. And, that's their story and their journey. Then there's other hitters, right? Well, they usually have a mixture of things that are going on, right? Some of it physical, some of it mental, some of it spiritual, some of the obviously interwebbing of all of those other things as well, right? Sometimes there's a skill issue, right? Maybe they how they're practicing and how they're doing all those things is also causing some of that. So usually we have to address a lot of these different areas. But yeah, some athletes it takes time to get performance out of. And also too, sometimes, yes, we are human, that even too, when we're training athletes, sometimes athletes go backwards before they go forward. And also too, I hope that you can connect with that. If you just take it as a person, you in your own life, have you never gone backwards to go forward, right? And sometimes people need to do that. And players just like are humans, right? They might sometimes have to go backwards. Sometimes it gets messy. We always call it the messy middle. Sometimes they get stuck in the messy middle, right? And understanding like I have to get, the bow and arrow effect, right? I got to get pulled back so I can get shot forward. And, we see that happen a lot too as well, which is why our relationships and all, again, communication, all these things are so important for, things that are going on. And also sometimes it gets worse because what they were doing before that's causing some of these issues is compounding, and we have to, work on that as well. So we lay all that within the foundation, right? Is that two different things. No, not every single one of our hitters is just going to hit, the best in every league all the time, right? The reason they're here is because they're struggling or working. And then two, also on top of that as well, is that no, we don't obviously just attract hitters. Usually, like how often do you go to the doctor when you're feeling great and healthy and everything feels amazing, right? Like unless you're just going to get a checkup in, we don't usually we're not the checkup place. Usually people are coming in here because of those other issues. So with that foundation, I know that that's something that you and I talk about a lot as well, because also as coaches, we have to keep that in context when we're working with these athletes, and obviously the approaches that we come with it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think for one, we were talking about this earlier this morning before the pod, was just this time of year and how we kind of got on this topic was just this time of year. About most of our college athletes are about a month to a month and a half in, right? Yep. So, they got a good enough number of at-bats underneath their belt to kind of either feel like they're on top of the world or feel like, everything's a failure and they suck. Usually there's not a lot in between. Usually it's one of those two. And then
I'm terrible.
My high schoolers are 20 games in here in Vegas. That is, I know some places haven't started yet, but my high schoolers here in Vegas are almost 20 games in, like 40 at bats almost already, like like around 30 to 40. So it's about that time range, and this is how we kind of got on this topic, was just the emotional side of hitting is kind of where we started. But then we in my head goes to how in the macro, when you look at it, kind of like you mentioned, we have, there's seasons, right? Like, okay, this is the off season, so we're going to really focus on X, but then we're in the in season. Now it's like compete time. And then, and we try to like categorize, because it makes sense to our human brains and we simplify it, but really like we're always doing all of those things, no matter what time of the year it is, right? Like, there's some time in the off season, we're really working on the emotional and the cognitive and that side of the game. Just as much as we are in season. And then also in season, we're still working on the swing, even though like I got a game tomorrow. Okay. Well, like the first few rounds, we're going to work on a couple of these things, right? Really make sure that we're staying on top of, how you're getting in and out of your back hip or whatever. But then also to finish up the day, we're going to hit how we're going to hit tomorrow, right? And we're going to get more. So, that's one of the things that's fun about balancing. And I know for me being a little bit more fresh, it's been like 4 years going straight to private, never coached any teams, which is a whole nother perspective, is like you mentioned, I don't have just from my current clientele base, I don't have, the whole team where my top 5 hitters are my best hitters, and I also got the bad ones, and I can balance myself out. Like almost every one of my hitters that have come in here, like were at one point arguably one of the worst hitters at their respective level or team.
For sure.
at that moment, or they were the best on their team, but they wanted to play at the next level. So then they go to the next level and realize they're not the best at that level,
I was going to say,
so on
like,
and so forth.
bookmark there too as well is one thing Cody doesn't get enough credit for on this side of that is that with that is like that's such a true statement that is, again, even here locally, right? We typically, if the hitter was already crushing and all these other things, and they already have, most of those hitters also already have established hitting coaches and all those things. So as we started local groups, we typically got all these hitters that were struggling, got cut, got all these other things. So we have a lot of high school hitters here specifically that, man, like this kid got cut from the team. This kid was, struggling to even start on JV or whatever that was. And now he's like one of the best players on varsity or one of the other things. Now he's going to go and have this thing. Because we always talk about that where specifically, of course, your top end, top 1% of the world, that gets the most, limelight, views, they're one of the top players in the country, all that stuff. Those guys get all the attention. But what gets lost in the development process and what development really is at its heart is being able to get, again, yes, those players are great, but also too, a lot of those players, especially ones that are already good, and then they start working with someone that's, after they've already been good, right? Is like, okay, you're tweaking, and that's also has its hard in its own right, right? It's very hard. For example, it's very hard to get a Major League Baseball player and make them better, right? Because they're already better than 99.5% of everybody on the planet, right? Specifically, even inside the baseball community, right? So it's very hard to get that guy better. So, it has its own respect. But at the same time, just because you throw batting practice to that guy, just because you throw flips and you get him reps, doesn't necessarily mean that like, oh man, look at all the success. Yeah, I'm such a pivotal part of this guy's career or something like that, right? So there's all of those things too as well. But when you go all the way back to this high school realm and also too where we club ball kids, all the things, right? All from this age group, right? But we're really talking about, 10 to 18, somewhere in that realm, right? In those years, there's also a lot of development that, or the body changes so much. Obviously they're maturing and there's all these things that are also obviously happening above the neck, quote, above the neck here, right? Where there's all this development that's happening in there. And also too, body wise, the things that are happening below the neck there are, crazy differences between age 10 and age 18. And then again, you got a 13-year-old that is, 4'2", and then you got a 13-year-old that we got, shout out to our boy Bradley that walked in here and he's, 6 foot,
already.
yeah, 6 foot and, 190 pounds or whatever the hell he was when he first came in. Right. So it's just like, you got things like that and you got all of that in between at the same ages. And then also you have the restrictions of the game where they're all playing on the same fields. And you can also get false affirmation where players they think they're good when they're younger, but they're just more mature, physically mature than other athletes, or even mentally more mature than other athletes at an earlier age. But then as they get older, they face new challenges, other things come up, and now who used to be good at certain ages, especially certain ethnic groups, they mature or their body matures or other things, and we commonly see that within the club ball scene all the time where certain ethnic groups will become more physically mature before other groups, right? And right? So like that changes throughout their progress as well, and they're going to face different challenges. And when you coach enough athletes, you start to see this demographic and how these different things affect different communities and what that takes as a hitter too. But I wanted to point that out as well, is that we have a bunch of hitters that Cody's done a really great job with where they came in as, again, players that were struggling even at low levels and are now going to go. And again, even to this point, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Cody, but every senior that we have that has wanted to play college baseball, I think we still have 100% placement rate all the way since you've been here. And also even before we even brought the farm into a physical location out here in Vegas. So that's a crazy thing that we're always really proud of, is just helping them find spots, and also too, them being good enough to go play in college. Right. So, and also that's a very big statement when we're talking about what you just said, which is some of them were either got cut, they weren't even playing on their JV team, and then now all of a sudden they're going and playing college. It's like those realities didn't even make sense. And so majority of the country, which that doesn't get enough attention, majority of the country is like that, right? Because you're only getting 5, I think maybe to 7%. I think it's still only 5 that are playing college also is well, within that to certain levels. I got to go back and look at the statistics. But again, it's obviously a very low percentage comparatively to all the players that are playing high school baseball at this very moment, right?
Right.
So that's actually a big thing to have players that are getting cut, that were getting released from their teams, not playing on their teams, and then now all of a sudden they're going to college and having 100% placement rate. Again, there's obviously something in the water, right? So, anyways, I just wanted to point that out and also give you some love there.
Well,
again, I've been in those things and done that with high schoolers for a really long time and club ball kids, and that's where you learn a lot of skills of learning how to actually develop players, because it's not easy when they're not already that good before you get them, right?
Yeah, and appreciate it because I think a lot of times too, like you mentioned, that work goes really unnoticed because they're even if they don't end up being the best player on their team. I mean, they got cut, and then you're a really good player for that team, which is a really big jump for that kid, right?
Yeah,
and so,
for sure.
a lot of times it does go unnoticed, but more than anything, like where my head goes to it is like because of all the different scenarios that I'm put in as a hitting coach, I deal with a lot of, like you said, unique problems. Like I have a hitter that's always been, now at this point, maybe always been the best on their team because they haven't played outside of Vegas. And now they're having this identity crisis because they're getting asked to go play with these teams in other states, and they're realizing, oh, there's other kids just as good as me, right? Or I have a kid that, did get cut as a freshman. Now he's a 3-hole on his varsity team. Yeah. And he's getting pitched to like the dude, and he's always been pitched to like, I don't care if I throw you fastballs down the middle. And so now he's having that problem, right? And then you have the problem where maybe you're in and out of the lineup problem, and it's like talking to them about that. Or like we were talking about specifically this morning, like you've had 25 at bats, right? And you think because you put in all this work and you're hitting 200 right now, but you've been walked and you've been hit and you have some sacks and whatever. And it's like, realistically, you don't, you feel like you've been up there a lot
and pinch at bats and like,
and you've been in the game.
Yeah.
But
sure.
When you look statistically, you're like, hey, in your next 10 at bats, if you bat 400 or 500 in your next 10 at bats, you're hitting 350.
Yeah.
You're hitting 360, right? And it's just like, you have all these different scenarios, which has been really fun to kind of help these people through. Or, hey, you do have a lot of at-bats right now and you're hitting pretty good, but you want to do better, right? Like you are hitting 300, but you think you should hit 400. Like all of these are different scenarios,
different dynamics,
right? And just like navigating through it, not only as a hitting coach, but navigating with them and putting yourself in those shoes as a hitter and as an athlete too, has also been really fun. Finding different ways to show perspective to them. Like, hey, don't forget where you came from. Or, hey, in the next 6 at bats, you go 2 for 3 your next 2 games, you're in a good spot. Oh, I never looked at it that way.
I think the one thing I was thinking about from the conversations you and I were having this morning and everything you just said there, I think a big job for you as a coach is always finding a way to give them hope or to create hope, right? When they have a lack of hope, right? They're not inspired, they're not motivated, they're not all these other things, they're self-doubt, there's all these other things. But if you can spark every day, right? And hope is like, you need it like a shower, you know what I'm saying? Like you need it every single day. You got to have these little things that give you inspirations of hope. And also too, when I've coached some of the high, hitters at the highest level of the game, all-stars, all these other things, it's like, man, guy might have been 0 for 4 that day, right? And I think this is like, a big thing is like, okay, the guy could have went. Okay, I'm gonna do an exclusive break. We're just gonna talk about it. we're gonna let this. We're gonna have this conversation come out. Okay, so. A couple years ago, again, hasn't been public to this point. We'll just kind of talk through it. But I had the opportunity. To work with Alex Bregman, right? And so when we had these conversations, again, he already too, out of respect, also in the other way, he has a really good team of people around him, right? He has an amazing, a PT that's with him, that travels with him, like again, really holds him together. Again, one of his friends, all those things that also, really take care of his body. He's also had a hitting coach since he was 13 years old. Jason Colombo, dude's the man also as well. So good with, keeping his mind right. Again, has helped him get to this other, he reserved every respect in the world too as well. And he just has amazing friend groups all the way around him, even his boy Tyler, that's, also the man too as well. And so when going into these things, obviously, Bregman is one of the top hitters in the world, right? And so when you look at that, right? Now, when I mean top hitters in the world, right, I don't mean that, again, like he's for sure Hall of Fame or any of these things, but obviously, right, he's one of the better hitters in the game. Everybody, again, guys making $40 million a year, he's obviously a pretty good hitter, right? So he's doing all right. So in any case, the only reason I'm bringing him up right now in this moment is because I do think this is some other things is, again, I've seen guys battle out of things, right? And so, to do this obviously wasn't expected. Wasn't necessarily a conversation, but I thought for some reason I felt like it was the right time now, is thinking about it from this other lens, right? Like originally when, Alex reached out to me, it was a couple years ago, he's going into All-Star break and he's batting like 220. He's really struggling, right? And he's been battling through things for a couple years. He's been struggling a little bit and he can't fix some of these other issues. And he just wanted another perspective, right? And again, like everybody, his hitting coach, everybody's still involved and is passionately around him and they love him and all the things. He just wanted another perspective. And so we started working on some things. The first week he hit like 6 bombs. He figured some things out, some cues and stuff clicked for him. In any case, the end of this story, right, is the second half of the season, he absolutely obliterated, batted, high. That MLB did a segment on him and was batted like, upper threes for the second half of the season at this point when they did the segment, right? And so the great thing about that, though, is I'm going to give all this credit to Alex, right, is obviously he was a great hitter long before Joey Cunha ever came around, right? Again, no credit from that lens of things. I want to talk about one of the things that the story like with him is a specific circumstance here, right? Which is, I remember one game, right? I traveled with him for about 2 weeks or so at one point in the season, and he'd been working on some things every day before the games. He's working on stuff, right? He's getting his work, and he's an early work guy. He's again gets one of the hardest workers in the MLB that I've ever seen. And also too, on the same side of that, obviously at the level he also plays at, is that's rare. He's a rare mindset, rare dude. Again, also too, great human, like from a lot of different angles. And I've seen him sit for hours and hours and hours and sign autographs for guys. I've seen him be completely frustrated at things going on in his life and how he still interacts with people around him and how patient he's been with, especially kids specifically. Like he's amazing in that lens. But one of the stories that I've talked about, me and you've talked about a couple times, is I remember we were working on some things pregame, all that other stuff, and he had gone 0 for 4 that game, right? And it was funny because when we're videoing, we're taking all the things, we're having these conversations, I'm writing notes of what we're going to talk about after the game, all this stuff, and we actually came through and after the game we're talking, and there was 2 at-bats that game where he hit 2 foul balls that were like really good. Like what he had been working on, it was happening. The only reason that they were foul was his timing was off. But what he had been working on was way better, right? So before I had even said anything, I walked up to him and I'm like, hey man, like, kind of like, light my eyes a little bit, like, hey, like you got some things. He's like, dude, did you see those 2 foul balls I hit today? And I'm like, yes, like those are actually the ones I was going to talk to you about. Like you had some really good swings there. Like you basically almost hit 2 homers today, 1 oppo and 1 pull side, right? But with some really good things you're working on. Like I'm excited for him, right? Like I'm happy for him. And it was cool though, because again, on the same side of that guy just went 0 for 4, right? And that's a hitter that's consistency. If you got to think about that, right? He's got 500 plus ABs a year. He usually makes playoffs, so he's got even more than that a lot of times than a lot of guys. Yeah. And again, halfway through the year, he's notoriously a slow starter, right? If you go look at his stats for the last couple of years, he starts really slow usually going into the season. Right now, he's doing pretty good in the fall, but in the spring. But we'll see how it progresses into the year, right? He's done some of these. So, anyways, historically, he kind of it paints this picture as someone that knows mentally how to stay in it. 2, on the opposite side of that, how to deal with failure, because he's not 28 at bats in. He's not 25 at bats in. Halfway through the season, this guy's probably 250 plus at bats in. And this is what he's batting. This is what he's struggling with. This is what his power numbers look like. This is where, when he reaches out to me originally, right, he's got like 6 bombs and he's batting 220, right? Halfway through the season, right? Then all of a sudden, or I think he only had 4 bombs at that point. Then he hits 6 bombs, and then all of a sudden he's got 10 home runs going into All-Star break when he just had 4 a week ago, right? So that's a massive thing where this guy is constantly trying to get better and make adjustments, and also knows how to mentally give himself those and identify these areas of hope and identify these areas where, you know what, there's things I can continue to get better at. And there's also things where on the other side of that, right, I'm not against listening to some other perspectives, hearing some other things like, hey, you know what, man, this really helped me. Man, this really helped. And there's certain key segments you can see, like, again, he did some MLB segments where he talked about a lot of the things that we kind of were talking through. And the good thing was like some of the things that we were kind of talking through was not necessarily creating this whole, not recreating, Alex Bregman, but more reminding him of things that he used to do or identifying for him things that, hey, this is what you used to do. And let's get you back more towards that, right? And now we might have some creative ways of getting there and all those other things. But again, more so than anything, I just wanted to highlight for him in that way. He produces at that level, not just because he moves so well and his body's perfect and all these things, like, because it's not, right? He knows he doesn't, and every single day, when guys get into this space where they're like, they get into the space where they're like, there's a lot of coaches who are like, man, you spend so much time thinking about your swing, working on your swing. And this is where I agree with them, right? Is you can't only work on your swing. You need to, if you're talking about performance, you got to work on all of it, right? And your mentality matters, right? Your emotional state matters, your mental state matters, your spiritual state matters. All these other things matter, right? They all go into how you're performing, your ability to be free, all these other things, and play free and open it up a little bit and just be able to play and have fun, right? All of that matters. But again, what I've seen, and this is why I counter that thought where I separate from some of those thoughts, is if you abandon your swing and go, oh, my swing got me here and I'm just going to swing my swing and I'm going to worry about all the rest of the things and it doesn't matter. No. Like Mookie Betts is working on his swing every day. Mike Trout is working on his swing every day. JD Martinez is working on his swing every day, right? Alex Bregman is working on his swing every day, right? He's trying to refine his skill. He's trying to refine his movement. He's trying to refine these things over and over and over again, right? Like he's trying to be he's trying to get better at everything, right? He wants to be a better player, right? And so when you look at that, right, and I think a big job, one of the things that I was doing as well, and what some of the strategy that I was also doing is working on those other areas with Alex between that whole time too as well. Because again, him, like any other hitter, there's times where, especially at a certain point in your career, it could be high school, right? It could be when you're in club ball. It could be when you're in, you went transferred from your JC to now you're playing at a big school. And do I deserve to be here? And these guys are, the bigger than life. These are the guys I used to watch and blah, blah, blah. Or you get to the big leagues and you start looking around and you go, again, like as we know, right? Like I trained Paul Skeens back in the day when he was a little high schooler. Now he's, having it pitching against some of the best hitters in the world, right? Guys that we used to talk about because he was also a pretty good hitter. Yeah. We'd be trying to model certain things in their swing, and now he's pitching against them, right? The other day when they were doing like I'm passing the phone to, it's like they were doing the thing. Paul Skeens was doing a trend on TikTok that they actually got my man involved with, but he goes, I'm passing the phone to, and he's like the GOAT, blah, blah, blah. And the next person is Mike Trout, right? Like I know as we were training, like that was a guy that he emulated, like he loved, right? So it's like, that's also a big piece on there as well, is like, okay, you get to that level and now you're facing those guys, and Ohtani was a big proponent of this when they played Team USA, right? When he was with Japan and they were playing Team USA, he said that in their speech in the locker room, like, hey, I know that you guys all look up to these guys that we're playing, but tonight, like, we're going to be better than them tonight. We're not looking up to them tonight. They're our opponents. We're getting out, and you have to change that or reframe that dynamic that you have with them. And I was like, specifically, the best hitters in the world are able to do that. And as a coach, one of your main jobs, right, that if you don't have an Alex Bregman yet, right, is you're trying to instill that, which is what, pointing back to Jason in that same way, right, and also the people around him, is they're all trying to do that every night, is inspire hope inside of him and encouragement and all these other things, because he's doing one of the hardest things to do in all of sports. Right. And also, too, there's so much failure in the sport, even if you're the greatest. There's so much failure in the sport compared to other sports that it really does work on your mind. And there's so many things of how can you fail this much, but still feel like you're the man and still feel like you can come out here every night and do those things. And I think that was a bigger piece there, was knowing and seeing how he would do that. And one of the ways that I try to help from my angle when, with him or where he was, is I know that some doubt had started to creep in, right? You you're having one of the worst career years of your life. Your contract year is coming up here in a couple years. You're, within 2 years, a year and a half really at that point or whatever. And then also too, as well, you start to doubt, like, am I getting old? Is the league passed me by? Can I still do this, right? All these little things start to seep in. And so one of the things that I was doing there for a minute too was he shared with me that one thing that Bregman used to do, and it's widely known in some other parts, that's why I'm just going to bring it up here, is that when he was in college, he used to watch Eric Thomas, when you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, like that speech, he used to watch it every day when he was in college, right? Before he would go and train and work out and do all the other things. And so that was like a big thing for him. So I knew that part of that, right, is I wanted to wake that up a little bit. I wanted to kind of give him a little bit of that again, just to get that self-belief higher than it was. Not that he didn't believe in himself, right? But there was some doubt that had slipped in. And so, again, I was sending him some of these perspective and these other, again, little things of hope, like every moment, every day, like, hey, new day, new hero, like, and just these little things that we were kind of putting in from that way. But as you mentioned, literally those couple things that you just mentioned was highlighting that. And I think that that's one thing that a lot of coaches can miss, right? Is that I got to give my hitters, even if they're struggling, it's like, hey, I might really struggle against lefties. It doesn't mean that I never hit against lefties, right? And it's like, again, I just might catch them today. I know what it's like to be on the mound and throwing against this guy, and I dominate this guy, right? I two-wayed when I played. I know what it's like to dominate this guy, but he got me today. He got me on this pitch in this moment to close out the game. He got me.
Yeah.
He beat me. So why can that not also be true for the hitter, right? And to give that to your hitter, hey, this guy, you know what? Generally, he kind of gets you, right? And he got some angle and he exposes some certain things or whatever. But like, it doesn't mean you can't hit him.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you'll never hit him, right? It doesn't mean that it's impossible, right? It's just that you've historically struggled. Great. That could be true. And also at the same time, it could also be true that you get a hit right now. It could also be true that you run into one or he gets around one and he leaves one fat right now and you take him deep to left, left right now. So there's also all of those things as well. And I think a lot of times as a coach, you're inspiring a lot of that and pointing them towards either resources or perspectives or things, obviously trying to get them to understand what that is. And if you can plant that hope, that's obviously a big thing that can happen for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And literally kind of like piggybacking off what we've already talked about too. It's like, and a little pivot. So from a player's perspective, right? And I had this, I guess this perspective myself was, as a coach, when you're training an athlete, God gave me this perspective of like, this is the thing that they've put more time and effort and energy into in their lives at this current moment than anything else, right? Like my 16-year-old sophomore softball player, whoever, right? They've been playing this sport since they were 5 and they've only played this sport. What else in their life have they willingly taken all the extra time, spent their weekends doing, spent their extra time coming here to train, looking up videos, asking questions, seeking help? There's been nothing else in these people's life that they've found that they're that passionate and that willing to give their time to. And so when I viewed it like that, and then as a hitting coach or just a coach or mentor in general, I wouldn't even necessarily, I know we've talked about this, like, I know back in the day you said like a swing therapist or swing therapy. It's like, again, I just view my title as like a mentor, like I'm a mentor that also helps you with hitting sometimes,
100%.
It's like, but I'm just as like a mentor is like, well, when I handle the situation as delicately as like, well, if this was the farm right now, you would really vet people out before you accept their advice, right? Like you don't just let everybody in, you filter information, right? Well, this is their farm. This is their baby. This is what they've put all their effort, their time, their energy, their reputation, their resources, all their friends know that
and so their whole life to get here.
Right. And so like when you look at it like that, and like we know from a bigger perspective, like, okay, there's more, like we're preparing you with life skills and this and that. And obviously me being a little less removed, like I've gotten to experience that and I've gotten to reflect back a little bit, Hey, listen, I ain't got the 3 before my name now.
Okay. Calm down now. We don't got to be dropping all that now. Calm down.
Hey, listen, it's wisdom. You got wisdom over there.
All right.
And it's like for me, I'm starting to like, actually live in life the experiences that, coaches in my past are like, you're going to be grateful that you like learn this skill now, because like you're going to need this one day in life, right? It's like showing up on time and, being respectful to people and, responding to emails to your professor, all this stuff that you're like, okay, yeah, whatever. It's like, okay, don't respond to an email with one of your, business partners or whatever, like, good skill to have. You better respond, right? And so I've got to live these, but also I still have the perspective of like, this is it for the kids and the athletes that we do train. And so then too, it's kind of helped from what you just talked about from like a giving hope perspective of like, well, sometimes, when life is kicking you and hitting you and, all these things are happening, for whatever reason, it's like, well, I would love some hope in, my personal life sometimes. So it's like, rather than saying, oh, it's not that big of a deal, you went 0 for 4, like, finding a way to flip that and give them perspective.
You literally hit on what I was just going to say there too, is like, there's a difference between, I think when some people talk about just like being positive, I'm optimistic compared to like providing hope in that same way. And what I mean by that is like, it's actually finding real things, right? It's not just like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's, these fluff, because an athlete, especially a high level competitor, like they know that it does matter. And also too, more than anything, it matters to them. Right. Yeah. So again, if you immediately discount that, like it doesn't matter, it's like, well, you're just immediately throwing away all my emotions or, all those things. And it's like, no, it does matter to me. Right. And so there's so much of that. And there's so many conversations that go untalked about. I know that, how often we're having conversations that are obviously not even in the cage. Right. And we've done a little bit better job lately of capturing some of those conversations that are actually happening, where we're not just giving a cue or a drill or a this or a that. Right. But like, there's a lot of late night conversations with a lot of our hitters, helping them through the struggle. As I mentioned the other day when I posted a thread where I was talking about coaching. It's much more important and impactful when an athlete is struggling, when they're not succeeding, when they're not all those things. When they're already rolling and everything's happening and they're crushing and all those other things, it's almost like the doctor, right? Like, how often are you talking to your doctor when everything's good, right? So it's like, that's when the doctor is most useful, right? And that's where we can be objective and we can come in and find some of these things of giving them some perspective and along with it. And also too, sometimes they can also be in denial, right? They could be in not moving great. They could have all these other things that are not going well. Maybe they have some really bad habits that they're doing in their life right now. Maybe some other things have entered, right? Like, okay, like let's say they get to college, right? And we talk about this, like I said, the college freshman happens all the time. They get a little overwhelmed. They're away from home for the first time. They get a girlfriend, and all of a sudden, right, they're not getting their extra work in, right? They're some of their habits that they're choosing, one about like, maybe how they start talking to themselves, maybe also too what the decisions they start to make about being in college and away from their family, and they start partying a little too much. They start getting a little loose with it. They start doing these other things. And sometimes you got to have those conversations too. And I've had plenty of professional athletes that are the same exact way, where we have to come, and again, I got some other stories, but maybe for another day, right? That I've had to come and have some of those conversations with them to tighten it back up, because I have to be real with them at the same time and say, hey, this is where you are. This is where you said that you wanted to be. What you're doing every day doesn't align with this. And my job is to be real with you, to tell you that these things don't align. Yeah. If you really want this, you have to change these things, right? I can't go and smash ice cream every single day, right? And be doing it, multiple meals and doing all these other things and then want a certain thing. Oh, I want to be a bodybuilder. It's like, bro, those don't align, And again, and that's where there's a difference there within the hope, right? It's like, I'm not saying that you didn't get out. I'm not saying that you didn't do these things. Like, hey, you did too. And first off, why do you feel entitled? Why do you feel entitled to never going 0 for 20 when Mike Trout goes 0 for 20? Why do you feel entitled to never get out when every hitter on the whole planet gets out, right? Why do you feel from that, when in that way, if you can just accept like, hey, failure and really, if you reframe what failure actually is really me quitting, right? If I'm still trying, I haven't failed yet, right? I've had some setbacks. I've had some hurdles. I have some things that have gotten some pivots and some reroutes and some other things, right? But also too, that's just feedback, right? My real failure, the only way I can really fail is if I I give up, when I quit, right? When I stop, right? And even then, there is a time and there's a season for everything. As I was just reading again in Ecclesiastes the other day, right? There's a season for everything. There is a time to start and there's a time to finish, right? There's times where I have to give players advice where I'm like, hey, all right, let's have a different. This is a very unique conversation. Hey, you've been in AAA for 10 years, bro. You know, this is what's going on. I also care about you as a person more than I just care about your career, right? And also, too, I'm here to help you with that transition, too. And also, I understand I've had conversations with guys that are struggling at that point in their career because they are worried about those other things. You know what? I didn't go to college. I got drafted straight out of high school. I've been here for 10 years. I'm 30 years old. I'm 31 years old, and I have no other skills other than this game. What am I going to do if I don't hit right now? And if we don't talk about the real things, they're going to struggle mentally because those are the things that are tying them up.
Yeah.
They're tripping them up because now they have all this performance anxiety. Performance anxiety is a symptom, right? It's tied to these other things, and everybody has their own things, right? And I have my own things. I've had plenty of athletes that have had their own things where they're facing some things, or you know what? Yeah, hey, I've been doing this for a while, but hey, my wife's pregnant. We're about to have a family, or hey, my dad's really sick, and he's not working right now. They're about to lose the house. I'm trying to help as much, these things kind of bleed into how I'm playing and all the pressure I'm putting on myself to perform at this really high level. And so as a coach, if you want to act like they're not human beings, if you want to act like that there isn't things in your life that would affect your performance, right? You're in denial on the other side of that too as well. So sometimes we also as coaches and as mentors and as leaders and those other things, friends with our athletes, is having those conversations with them of helping them get to where they want to get or what they're in alignment with. It's like somebody coming into a Ferrari dealership and they're like, hey, all right, I got $10. I want a Ferrari. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I'm only paying $10 for this Ferrari, right? And it's just like,
wrong place.
Bro, I'm just telling you, what you're doing with what you want don't align. And my job is sometimes just to tell you and bring awareness that these things don't align. And also, if you want these things, this is what that looks like. Or to also maybe help you set goals that are a little bit more reasonable and reachable for where you're currently at. It doesn't mean that you can never get there. But also, too, you're just looking at there, and there's all these million steps that are attainable in the meantime that we can work on and get better at, and things you can do today to get you that lead towards that path to get you to there, rather than you're just going either I'm an All-American or I suck. It's like, dude, there's a billion things in between those two, right? And there's all these things that we can focus on that will, as we get better at these things and we get better over time, we can actually get to this other place. But sometimes that's also the other thing as well. We might be doing skills to help them, with some of that. And, I know for, specifically too, which again, just in recency of with this, but, we obviously have plenty of athletes that are in that recruiting process. And, there's some things that pop up in there. There's some performance anxiety that pops up in there, right? Or also too, the ones that haven't signed and they're a senior. Same thing. Also too, I deal with it a lot. Where in college they're a senior, right? And it's their last year, and they had all these hopes and dreams and what it was going to be, and now they're putting all this performance pressure on themselves, and they're struggling that way. Or they're the sophomore and they're getting some at bats and they're struggling that way. But I wanted you kind of touch on, I know from your angle too, with because I know a lot of people are in the middle of that, right? Which is like they didn't get that phone call. Yeah. They did get the phone call, didn't go the way they wanted, right? Or they got offers, but it wasn't from the school they wanted. Or it was, schools are coming out and watch me play, but I'm putting all this pressure on myself, and now I'm doing, there's all of that, right? And everybody thinks everybody thinks I'm talking to them right now, but in reality, like, yo, you're not a unicorn. Yeah. Right? This happens constantly. Yeah.
I get a lot of them.
Yeah.
Here. Yeah. Currently, right now. So, I mean, if you're dealing with it, I got multiple here right now, just my current hitters. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I think, and I'll flip this back on you at some point too, but I mean, I think with that process, like I've had a few hitters, here and there, but this is really like the first year we've been here long enough where I have like a wave of hitters that are in that process, So I'm definitely not going to act like, I'm the expert when I know you've definitely had more hitters like this, but almost, again, more in anybody that listens to us normally, very biblical and spiritual people over here. Like, I view it more just like biblically, like you just got to continue to plant seeds, like there's a time to plant seeds. There's a time to, harvest and, and pick the crops and, there's just different seasons. Right. And so, with some of these athletes, like they haven't experienced it yet. They haven't experienced a coach coming to watch them. And they don't know if they do get nervous or if they turn it up a notch, right? Yeah. Like, we just had a hitter, me and Taylor talked to quite a bit here, Mikey, who he hasn't been playing to start the year, right? He's a freshman and, he's a freshman. This is what it is, right? He gets his first at bat and he goes 1 for 1, seed up the middle. And it's like, turned it on. Awesome. Like, happy for you, dude. But I've also had athletes that, like, they get their 1 at bat and they're like, they
First
like can't breathe.
20
they
at bats.
can't, they can't think.
Full season.
I literally go, hey, like, how'd that bat go? I don't even remember. Like, they can't even remember how the at bat gone. And so it's like, sometimes it's like you plant seeds and you can kind of, just from your experience, like personally and having other athletes, I can kind of see it coming down the road. Like, this is definitely a hitter that's going to press a little bit. And like when she or he does press, usually it's not their best games or, I apply a little pressure in here and I make a competition, which, isn't the game, but the best I can. And I get them all like kind of trash talking each other. And this person always turns it up a notch. Like I can kind of assume, based on the situations I put them in and, the environment. But, some of it is just, they got to be put in those situations and then just planting seeds along the way, so that we can refer back to almost like little anchors, right? Like, I'm going to make you struggle one day because I know, like, I'm your hitting coach. I've coached you for a year. Like, I know what you do well and what you don't do well. I'm going to intentionally make you struggle. Yeah. And I want you to have a day that is tough and that emotionally makes you want to not play softball anymore or baseball anymore.
Isn't book there is, Tave, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the statement is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Yes. And so that's also a big thing as we were talking about too, as well, is like, hey, like I've seen how you've reacted and how you responded in some of these, previous circumstances that are either similar or the pressure started to come up or there's, some of these other things. And so, again, like, and we start to work on that. Right. And also the best predictor for for future behavior is past behavior is guess what? If we start changing that past behavior, might be how you're training in here, right? And how we actually work on those things now. And slowly over time, as those things change, you change the story, you change the book, you change the responses, right? Again, you rewire some of those past and those things that we do upstairs, right? So it's like some of that as well, obviously as well, which is what you're talking about too as well. It's patterning is not, of course, obviously, when we talk about patterning, as we're talking about how somebody moves, it's, all these things that are happening from here in the brain and then how it connects with the body and all the stuff. But guess what? Our thought processes and our thought patterns and all those things are also patterns and paths and all those things. So there's ways to work on those things too, where it's like, hey, when you think different, right, as a man thinketh, like as you think different, your world also changes and what you focus on and how you respond and all those other things. Those things are also, that's why when the Bible talks about holding thoughts captive and all those other things as well, is all of that feeds into what you're saying right now as well as what we do and what you try to do for them in the cage. And also it's crazy because like I said, I remember when I was younger and I would watch these cage sessions and some of the guys that were mentoring me and all the things, like, man, they were talking with them so much. And I'm like, as a younger coach, I'm like, I just want to do drill, this. Yeah. But, it's a mix, right? Is because obviously it's not just a physical problem. There's these other things. And also, if you don't take the time to actually get to know the athlete, you don't know what their lowest hanging fruit is or what the reason they're struggling with this is or any of those other things anyways. And if you don't put them in those situations and all that stuff too, again, you might be missing a ton of information that's really useful to obviously help them perform. Right?
Yeah. And so I think just planting seeds has been one, for me, just noticing like it's going to happen at some point, whether it's their junior year in high school or maybe they do get recruited by their D1, their favorite school, whatever, right? And then they get there and they just don't play as a freshman and they think they're going to go there and be the starting whatever. And it's like, well, they also brought in the best girl for the next 5 states bordering your state too for the same position. So it's like, it's not, you're not just walking in to start, right?
For sure.
And so, I think it's just planting seeds because at some point those conversations will happen.
Yeah.
And then I also think too, like a lesson that I learned is, sometimes sometimes the way God will teach you is he'll keep giving you more because he knows that you're going to keep trying to take it on yourself.
Yep.
Until it's so heavy that it gets so heavy that you can't carry it anymore and you have to give it to him, right? And so sometimes, so like sometimes too, as a hitting coach, like I can see that behavior, like with Shanti up at Utah sometimes, like like keep planting seeds, but I had to let her get to the point where she literally just got to, and she would.
Cody just name dropped today, huh?
Well,
I name dropped. I name dropped, and then Cody was like, "I'm name dropping, baby."
Yeah. Well, also,
but no, she's a great example.
No, like she's a really good example, and then also too, I think she'd be more than willing, just where she's emotionally and mentally at, like to talk about it as well. Like I think she's come a long way where. She literally just admitted, she's like, I've just been trying to like swing harder to deal with my problems, and it's just like physically, that's not the problem. Like I just need to move better and stop trying to like overswing all the time to fix my problems. Right.
Yeah.
And like, I see that from more of like an emotional, spiritual way. It's like, you're trying to hold on or pick up more weight yourself when, like the wisdom of what people are saying around you or the lessons you've learned in your past, like, literally that conversation, I was like, hey, you remember when we talked about this like a month ago? Yeah. It's like, I just went back to that seed that was planted. Right. And I didn't know if it was going to happen this year, next year, ever, or if she would just never talk to me ever again,
they have their own like time capsule, it's like counts down and they're all in different things. Some of them it'll be this year. Some of them like you could do, again, obviously human beings, like we're all crazy different, but I feel like with that, like there's certain areas of our life that, this one might take 10 years. Mm-hmm. This one might take 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. This one might take, with that, right? It might be it could be the same exact thing said, even if you were, which is obviously impossible, the same exact tone, same exact person, you could take all that stuff, but it's just at a different time, right? That they're willing to like, let that get into them at that point. And then it's like, man, like, I don't know if you've ever said that before, but all of a sudden, right now that just really clicked. But I also understand that from a personal standpoint, if you bring it back for me, it's like reading the Bible, right? I've read that verse 50, 60
means
times.
Something different every time.
It doesn't mean like all of a sudden I read it this time and I'm like, oh man, that just hit me way different.
The living word.
Yeah. Oh man, that hit me way different this time when I read it. Then I'm like, man, like, like it's a different thing, right? And also too, if you've ever been coached and all those other things, like sometimes we get so far away from playing, which is like why we were talking about even when we went back to started playing as well. It's like, man, sometimes you forget what it feels like emotionally and spiritually and all those things when you're struggling or you haven't, you're making adjustments and nothing seems to be clicking and nothing seems to be going your way. And it's like, man, I feel like I'm changing all these things, but my world isn't changing. I'm changing all this stuff, but it's not changing. And I think that that's also, a big piece too as well. It's like, hey, well, that's part of the journey too. The part of the journey, and I think we miss this all the time too, is again, like I said in that post that I made a little while back ago, and I really pulled to that, is in the trying, right? Trying is progress, right? We like, oh, it's either you do or you don't. And it's like, no. In my try, I learn more about what routes either not to take that don't work. And it makes me build conviction in what I'm doing is because I had to go down those branches of the tree. As a coach, I had to do the same thing. I went down and explored, okay, I'm just going to swing as hard as I can and work on bat speed and all those other things. And it's all about how hard can I rotate. I've done that. Right? I've done crazy machine work and we go all these crazy angles, all this other stuff, triple machines over here, shooting all this other stuff. And oh man, that by itself is going to work. I've done that route too. I've also gone down routes where it's like, hey, everything is pure efficiency. How efficient can we get this swing? And if we get this swing super efficient, that's what's going to make them perform. Okay. Then I've also go down on routes that it's like, oh, there's this perfect technique. There's this perfect technique. It's not even just efficiency. There's a technique that is perfect. And if I just do it this way, I'll be successful all the time. All of those things, you have to go down those paths, and there's thousands of more, hundreds, millions of more paths that you can go down that you have to go and try them, which then builds you conviction, where I almost feel like you get this really large like bandwidth, or almost like bumpers. Like when you go bowling, right, and you throw up the bumpers, right? Imagine if those bumpers were 100 yards apart, right? If you go and bump, like, yo, and then as I start working more, the bumpers get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And also too, just like a movement pattern for an athlete, right? When a little kid, those bumpers are thousands of miles apart, right? Every time they come in, they're going crazy different options. They have all of these crazy options. As they get more skilled, those bumpers get tighter and tighter, right? To the point that you don't even need bumpers, right? And then now they know without the bumpies, without the bumpers, without the training wheels, without the things, right? Like they can do it, right? And they don't need so much feedback where they can self-regulate and they can go inside their path and they know, hey, I'm getting a little this way. I'm getting a little this way. I'm starting to think like this again. I'm starting to slide this way again. And also too, those are also skills you can also develop even too personally, as I've developed those within therapy, right? As you're building therapy, you start to notice certain patterns of thought where you start to get off track and you start to, if I water this wolf a little, or this wolf, if I water this wolf, if I water this plant a little too much, right? If I grow this way a little too much and I give it too much attention, this is what this leads to. And this is one of the things I talk about with a lot of times with our hitters is like, I'm like, hey, at the end of the day, this is the thing with people that get stuck in this thought trap. They can get into this place of the opposite of optimism, hope, all those other things, positivity, all these other things, right? And it's like, oh yeah, that's big. I get it. I know all the things. I've heard all the stuff. I read the books. I know. Oh yeah, mental. I got to think positive, right? And everything will be, yeah. But look, here's the opposite. Bad things are always happening. Things are always not going your way. Not, people are people. They're going to hurt you. They're going to, make mistakes. They're going to say the wrong things. They're not going to be there when you need them. They're going to do all these other things. We're human. We all fall short. This is why we need God, right? God is the one that we should be depending on. That's why we should put all of our faith in that way and all those things. And even there as well, we also got to remember too, that how we need someone to show up or be, or this or that, or whatever, or how we needed our life to show up and how it needed to be, all these things that we think that we need all this other stuff. That's also all attached to our perception of our right here and now. Then all of a sudden you grow up and you go, oh man, wow. Like now I have a different perspective on what it feels like to be a parent. And I have to be holding all these other things down. And, I really held, my mom really accountable to that when, that's how I was feeling at the time, but I don't feel that way anymore because I understand her differently. I understand my coach differently now. When I look at that, I thought he was just being a dick and really, on the side of that, he was trying to help me in a different way. You know what? Maybe I wouldn't have done it in that way, but at the end of the day, like, don't hear the bark, hear the message. I get where he was coming from with that. And at the end of the day, he's a human like I, and you know what? And maybe in that one conversation, in that one moment that you remember in your head and all those other things, maybe he was having a really bad day. Maybe he had a really bad 10 years and that was a moment where he got really triggered and some other things happened and all these things. Like at the end of the day, we go that way, right? So I think also on this other piece with it, and while I was coming back to these things, it's not about denying the bad things that are happening. It's all about where we focus our attention, because where we focus our attention, we obviously give fuel to, we give water to, we grow that other area. And you're right. You could be the best person in the world at identifying every bad thing that's happening and what everybody is doing and every shortcoming that everybody has. And you can identify everything that is not going your way. And you could be an expert at all of those things, but you're going to be empty. But you're also, because you're focusing your attention that way, what starts to happen is you start to have an inability to even notice the good things that are happening because you're such an expert at seeing everything that is not happening. So if you can go the opposite way too as well, and again, it's not about denying any of those things that are happening, right? It's being able to see those things as feedback, and also too, what do I want to water? If I want to, I just want to, hand this over.
The wolf.
Yeah.
I want to water the wolf.
Yes, I want to water the wolf, right? The wolf needs water, right? Is that if you seriously sit there and ask yourself, would I rather be able to notice every single thing that is not going my way, that what everybody falls short of, all those other things, I can go on and on and on and on, or would I rather be an expert at every blessing that is in my life, that every beautiful thing that's happening in these other human beings and things that I would like to see? And would I rather not miss a single moment of the other side of it? And when you figure out where you'd like to focus your attention, right? Because those things will always be there. There will always be things that are not going your way. There'll always be those other things. You can find them for the rest of your life. They'll always be there. There's plenty of things, right? But also too, there's the other side of that. There's plenty of beauty in the world. There's plenty of grace in the world. There's plenty of love in the world. There's plenty of all these other things. And so it's where you focus and what side of the fence you want to live your life on and where you want to grow. because again, I'd rather not miss any of those things, because in that hope and all those things, it makes me a better person. It makes me grow. It makes me happier, more joy, more peace, more mercy, more grace, more self-control, more all those things that lead to me on a trend towards places that I want to go, rather than no one's complaining themselves to the top, right? No one's complaining themselves to a happier life. No one's complaining themselves. Like all of those roads that are on the opposite side don't lead to anywhere positive. And the reason I'm bringing that up too is for hitters. I say the same thing to them. You can sit there and complain about everything the umpire is doing and every call that's not going your way, and the coach is not playing you, and the other girls are hitting, and she's not even that good, and he's not even that good, and I can blah, blah, blah. And you can do that. You can sit in the back of the dugout and you could pout and you could cry and you could do all that, right? But, right, as Taylor always likes to remind me of, right, when we have these conversations, the one thing I always say, after your emotions, after you're done whining, after you're done complaining, after you're done, looking at every bad thing that's happened to you, then what? Because after your emotions, you still have to make a choice, right? Your complaints don't make things better. Noticing everything that's not going your way doesn't make anything better. It doesn't get you out of here, right? If you can't look at all the reasons why, and this is where I always think about the man at the well, right? Or the man at the fountain, is the man at the fountain, right? Where when Jesus comes up to him, he starts telling Jesus every reason why he can't be healed. He has noticed everything that's in his way. But instead of ways, right, he's not looking for, right? He's gotten so calloused to what could happen, hope, right? All these other things and what could happen in his life, that he's now calloused to, well, there's no way out of here. And he's lost all hope, and he's in this other place. And he's like, that's why when Jesus asked him, do you want to be healed? That question seems silly, but he's been calloused to the point where it's like, he doesn't even want to be healed anymore. He just wants to complain, right? He wants to say every reason why he's not where he wants to be, and all those things, rather than being like, hey, do you actually want to leave here? Do you actually want to go somewhere else? Do you actually want your life to be different? And again, you can do all that, or you can get to work. You can get to work and you can start working on what's going on in your life. You can start trying to have better at-bats. You can start focusing on various particular things in regard to the path of where you are and where you want to go, and all those million steps. And you can just get to work. You can just get to work. After your emotions, you're going to have to get to work anyways, right? So you might as well just get to work. You're wasting time. You might as well just get to work now. And if you just start working on it right now, right? And you start building and stacking days and stacking days and stacking days, at some point, it won't look like this anymore. You know what I'm saying? And this is coming from, and again, why it's big for me is this is coming from, again, like I didn't grow up with a whole bunch of money. I didn't grow up with, again, it was uphill both ways, right? With snowing and all the things, right? But my point is I didn't want my life to look like how it was when I was growing up. And at the end of the day, you can sit there and complain, and there's plenty of people that I grew up with that are still doing that. Still sitting there and complaining about everything that's not going their way, about how, they didn't get this opportunity, they didn't get this, they didn't get that. Or I can just put my head down and, I can get to work, right? And I can start doing things, right? I can start doing things to make my life better. I can start doing things as a hitter. I can start stacking at bats. I can start asking questions. I can start having conversations. I can start sitting next to the hitters that are hitting in the lineup and picking their brains and figuring out what's going on from that side. I can start having at bats as the guy that's batting in front of me. He's standing in the box. That's my at bat. I'm watching. What is he doing? He's throwing him. Oh, fastball. Umpire made a bad call outside. Okay, how did he? What am I doing here? Okay, I'm resetting. I'm looking for it. I know breaking ball's coming right after this, or right. And I'm having that at bat with him. When I'm going right. I'm getting 4 at bats today. I don't care if coach puts me in the lineup or he doesn't. I'm getting my 4 at bats today, right? And I can keep doing that. I can do pitch tendency charts. I could sit there and do the charts, and then I'm thinking along with the hitter. You know what, man? I didn't notice how I started doing pitch tendency charts. You know what? Dude, 2-0, this guy throws a changeup every time. 2-0, this guy does this, right? 1-1, this guy throws this pitch every time. 95% of the time he's throwing this. Then you start to pick up some of those things. That's why it's also good to also catch and other things too as well. It can give you a different perspective and insight. Or I've even umpired because, again, it gives you a different perspective and insight as a hitter to kind of open your schemes and start to think about it a little bit differently too as well. So I think that's also, a big piece there as well, as again, learning how to stack those days and being able to put that together and do that for hitters too as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you made the bumper analogy earlier, and it actually, I always think kind of like at church, give a good story, a funny story, and it always connects with people. So I actually had a hitter, a younger softball girl here this week, and I just asked her, I was like, I think she said she's gonna go play pickleball after our session or whatever with her family. And I was like, do you do anything else? Like, you ever gone bowling? And she was like, yeah, one time. I was like, you any good? She goes, I bowled an 8. And I was like,
an 8,
like an 8, like total. And she goes, yeah, I knocked over 8 total pins the whole time. And I was like, girl, it's like,
wow,
you didn't put up bumpers? And she goes, no, my family said that's cheating. And so it actually kind of like inspired this thought, was like, you know, as a
honestly,
hitting coach.
First though, that's a fucking skill. That's a skill. Only hitting 8. I mean, you could probably not try, and then you can throw between the legs behind you or something. You know what I'm saying?
8.
Like one time you
total.
gotta knock a couple over, at least 5 one time.
No, literally,
I mean, that's a skill right
literally
there.
An 8. I don't know if you were back there for when she said that, but literally an 8.
I was
like,
woo.
I was like, yeah, girl, keep playing pickleball for sure.
Yeah, pickleball. Hey, you might need another. Yeah, woo.
But
all right.
But it actually, you know, it inspired this thought too. Is like, from going back to the giving hope to hitters. It's like, well, then it kind of gave me the idea of like, well, what if just take Vegas, this city right here. What if Vegas had no streets, no freeways, no streets, and you just had to get to where you're going, no structure, right? It's like, well, how long would it take you to get there? How frustrating would it be? Like, how much would you wander? Like, I know me, I'd just drive all the way around the mountains because I ain't dealing with people's crap. You know what I mean? It would take me 4 days to get to what takes me 30 minutes with some structure, right? And as like a hitting coach, right? Sometimes I almost view it as like, we're just giving them like a different path, right? It's like you put up the GPS and it gives you 3 options. This is how you get there. Here's the fastest route. Here's this, here's that, right? But how does it know it's the fastest route? You know, it's like based on data, the traffic, you know, how long
Tracking
it's taken
other
other
cars,
people,
other
right?
people
It's like,
stuff,
again, so it's like past experiences.
I'm with this analogy. I'm
right?
with it.
and so like with that is like, we're basically, like you just said, you're giving different paths to get there. Like, go sit by the best hitter. Go look at the charts.
Yeah.
Go hit yourself.
Yeah.
You know, maybe at practice, do this. Go do this in your sessions. Go work on this. Go not work on that. Whatever, right?
Yeah.
Go take a journal. Go physically look at video. Go do, like, all these are different paths, right? And for them, they'll find the best way based on where their home is, right? Maybe their home is like, they already move really well. So they really love talking about, the journal helped me a lot, but maybe this person doesn't move really well. So the journal doesn't mean a lot to them. They want to talk about their swing, right? And so it's like, based on where they're at right now or where they were, whatever, right? This may be the fastest path for them to get to where they're going, right? Yeah. And so again, like as a hitting coach, like giving hope to, I almost view, and I know too, like we recently had a lot of the kids doing journals, and like I know most of them probably don't give 100%, if 50% to their journals, to be honest. But, you know, more than anything, it's another opportunity to like build a skill. Maybe it's not journaling. Maybe for them, that's just the start of them willing to open up and have a conversation with somebody. Maybe they do start journaling. Maybe, you know, then they're like, why do I even do a journal? Blah, blah, blah. I prefer video. Okay, great. Well, you've never told me. Right. And we've looked at video. I didn't even know that you loved looking at video. So let's look at video. Like, it could just be an avenue for me to learn more about them. And maybe it has nothing to do with journaling. But again, it's a different path to try to get to where we're going. Yeah. And, you know, just with these different athletes as a hitting coach, like the finding hope thing is like, I just found a new way to get to where I was going. And then this is the fastest route for me. Yeah. This, like, I love the fastest route.
Sometimes stacking onto your analogy, I think it could be the same exact road that they're using. And so one of the things I thought about with like traffic, right? Sometimes you get into traffic, maybe there's some construction up ahead, right? And it's like, hey, when you're driving along this road, you always get in the right lane, but because everybody has to merge from here, this is the slower lane.
You down, yeah.
Right? If you just get all the way over here, or maybe you're in the fast lane because you think it's fast, right? Oh, this is the fastest way because I'm in the fast lane, but maybe that's where the construction is and everybody has to merge, right? And so you start to figure out, hey, actually, if I just get over here and I take this route, or I go my path, I get off on this exit and I go one exit forward, get back on the freeway, and then finish the rest of my journey. And so sometimes with that, right, where we have the perspective of is almost like being a helicopter or like a plane that can see from above, right? And we can see these different routes of how to get there, right? And we know the timeframes and we have some data and we have some experience and we have some other things, right? And so sometimes, you know, we just providing a different perspective and then we can give them insight into our perspective. Like, hey, let's see it from this 50,000 foot view. Let me show you why you, again, let me help you see maybe again with video, with all these other things. We're showing them insight. Maybe we're showing them data. Like for example, one of the things that you brought up earlier, right? I've had multiple hitters that sometimes people, oh, like batting average or data or all these other things is like the enemy to like an athlete, right? But also too, it could be a really perspective, like a useful tool for perspective. And so sometimes I have to go to a hitter and go, hey, you would say that you're like struggling, like you're not playing too good right now. Like, I know you probably feel like you're the worst, all these other things. I was just looking at your, stats, and I just wanted to bring some up to you, right? I've had sometimes it's getting them focused on something specific, like, hey, you have one of the highest on-base percentages on the whole team? Did you know that? Like, or this one's always been a pretty powerful because there's some hitters that really, especially when hitters are good and they just, man, you know what? They just fell into a couple things, right? They start to feel like the weight of the world's on their shoulder. And I go and have this perspective with them. I go, hey, I went and looked and I was like, if you had 6 more hits, 4 more hits, 8 more hits, that you'd be batting well above the highest batting average you've ever had, like almost by 150 points. So are you really about to be like, man, I suck. I'm doing terrible. I'm having a terrible year. I'm doing all these other things over 6 hits. Cause girl, like I've seen you get, 4 diving plays. I've seen, like against you, I've seen people do this, rob your home run, or I've seen fielders' choices that would have turned into hits, or how about all those at-bats that you got hit by pitches or walks or all those other things that could have turned into where there were just 4 straight balls on those pitches that you could have had a hit that at-bat. Or how about on the other side of that, right, too, that you hit a ball that wasn't even a good ball, but the defense was positioned just slightly different. You dropped a bunt your last at bat, so now they're playing in, and that ball through the 6-hole gets through. That ball up the middle gets through. And now all of a sudden, your batting average is in a whole nother place, right? And you're feeling all these other things. So are you telling me that your confidence as a hitter is tied into 6 hits? Right? And so sometimes we do that, and it's crazy because sometimes when you bring those stats up, like, again, I did that today, and you bring those stats up with a hitter, and they're like, that's crazy. I've only had, 25, 30, 40, whatever at bats. I feel like, again, one of our hitters today was just like, man, I feel like I've had over 100 at bats. That's what it feels like, right? And then also I bring in as well, hey, also, again, especially with a hitter, we're talking about inspiring hope. Hey, I know that you're looking at the stats that were what? Recorded. How about all those live at-bats that you did in between starts, that you hit off that are high-level pitchers, that are Power 5 pitchers, that are doing all these other things at your practice, right? With your pitching staff, with your other things, and you're hitting home runs and doubles and singles, and you're going 500 and all those things. Well, what if we brought those stats in? Would you be looking at those stats thinking that you were a terrible hitter? No, you're going by from this little limited data set, right? For these 30 whatever at bats at this point in the season, and now you're about to draw a line in the sand and sign your name and signature here that I'm a terrible hitter, right? When instead, how about the opposite way? How about the girl that isn't that great of a hitter, and she had a couple off the end and it just got over the infield and she got jammed and all these other things, and now she's batting this. Is she one of the greatest hitters now all of a sudden because she's got 4 more hits and those situations and things have also gone the other way? It's just like, hey, like at the end of the day, again, don't hang your hat on a season, on a year, or on these things. At the end of the day, those things that's just feedback, right? It's just feedback. You know what? At this point of the year, again, every hitter, I don't care who you are, you're going to struggle. It's coming. If you're crushing right now, keep crushing. Think that it's never coming, right? But if you get on the other side, in reality, right, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be times where I hit terrible. There's times all those things. And again, if somebody like Alex Bregman can go 250 at bats in and be batting 220, 2 whatever, and then finish the year batting 270, 280, and all those other things, and he can do it multiple years in a row, again, it's not because he's a terrible hitter, right? It's just feedback, and he's seeing it as feedback. You know what? I'm not moving my best right now. My mental state's not in the right spot. Emotionally, I'm here, blah, blah, blah. I'm pressing. I'm doing all these other things. We can work on these things, and as those things get better, you can turn some things around. And don't let your playing time, a limited amount of at-bats, even a whole season of at-bats, and a whole season you stack into it and let that define you, when in reality, it's just feedback, and things can change. You start to think that things will always be this way and nothing can ever change and all these other things. No, maybe you just haven't figured out a way that has worked yet, right? And again, you're doing the trying thing, right? You got to try. So as you try, the only way that you really do fail is when you stop trying. You got to keep trying, going down some different avenues, trying some different things, learning about yourself and figuring out, because that will lead you to the conviction of, you know what, the difference between a freshman and a senior there generally overall is they have that journey and that perspective of all these things that they've tried, and they go, hey, you know what? I know when I get like this, like I always bring this quote back, right? It's like that Edgar Martinez quote, right? The difference between me and a young hitter is when they're 0 for 10, they start to doubt their ability. When I'm 0 for 10, I know I'm due, right? And so that's a whole nother thing where, again, a more mature hitter that understands like, hey, it's only a matter of time, right? And that's him giving himself hope. It's only a matter of time. I'm going to figure it out. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. And that's also the difference too, as well, as where we were talking about that earlier, is the perspective of having, okay, hey, we know that positive self-talk is good. We know that reframing and all these other skill sets that you can learn from that side are good. Okay, how do I apply that specifically towards my situation that I'm currently in this exact moment? And that's where coaching can tie in with those other resources to bring this in, where I can go, hey, you know that 6 at-bats is the difference right now, and you're hammering yourself right now over 6 at-bats, and that reframing, that different perspective, and then also inspiring hope there, all of a sudden turns into positive self-talk. You start building some momentum and all these other things, you know, in that spot where, hey, and you know, also this other thing, the thing that inspired me and gave me a little hope 3 weeks ago might not be the same thing today, and that's okay. We come up with something new today. Maybe a couple weeks ago it was changing my walk-up song and, doing some, changing my bat and, laying a bunt down, a drag, or, like there's all these things. Maybe it's I hit a ground ball, the guy makes an error, and it's not even one I got a hit on. And then I just get on base. I forgot what it felt like to be on base. And oh my, I don't know, you know that feeling. It's like, oh man, I ain't been on base in 2 weeks, man. I just want to get on base. If I just get on base, I feel like I'm in the game. Yeah. I just want to feel like I'm in the game. Like, coach, pinch run for me. Like let me get in there just to pinch run with somebody else getting on base so I can feel what it feels like to just be in with the team and contributing and taking a bag and using these other things as part of the game. And then also too, I think the other part where we do with athletes too as well is letting them also understand that the ways that they can have impact on not only the game, but also to all of these other, not only your teammates, your coaches, other people in your lives, of understanding that you're a lot more than just what's going on performance-wise from those other ways. Like, again, there's somebody today, right, where we say get off yourself and get on your team. There's somebody today that needs something from you. You know, that they could use something from you. Maybe it's a pat on the butt and be like, hey man, you got this. Or maybe it's telling them, hey, in 2-0, this guy's throwing nothing, whatever. And you gave them an opportunity, like, man, that actually, helped me a lot. I got to 2-0. This guy threw me a changeup. I hit this ball up the middle. That could be really big for me today. Or you know what? Maybe this person's they've been struggling and you're struggling too, but they have been struggling and they had a big moment. They got a big strikeout or they got a hit or whatever. And you're juice for them. Like, hey, you know what I'm saying? And you're getting to them. And one of the things I've been saying a lot more lately too, is you get to celebrate a lot more when you celebrate other people's successes, right? Because success isn't, it's something that's going to constantly happen all the time for you, right? So when you celebrate other people's successes and you have mudita and you again, vicarious joy in other people's success, right? When you get into that other place and you're excited for other people, again, it's really good for you too. All the things that it does for your brain, all those other things, where you're not only celebrating when you're successful, because success, the reason that it's called success is it's lucrative. It's all over the place, right? It's defined broadly. We can move the goalpost all the time, but instead it's a lot easier if we get into other people in that way, and look that again on the same side of that, or perspective-wise that a lot of times we do with all our athletes that are deeper in their faith, is get them back focused on like, hey, you're doing this for God's glory, not for your glory, right? And even in your suffering, it can bring glory to Him, and how you suffer and all those other things is also massive as well. Where it's it's not just about us, it's not about our success. I got to hit 500 and that's the only way. That's a very superficial perspective that we can kind of get tied into.
Yeah. And then kind of going back to that, like the traffic analogy too, and I know I've brought this up to you, kind of going, back to that, but also talking about what you just talked about is like, I was in traffic a couple weeks ago on the 15, and then I was telling you how Naomi was
not
like
Vegas the 15.
Yeah, it's like Naomi was like, get off and go that way, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then I think I told you from like
You
a
told me
church
too.
perspective, and I
remember.
told you it's just like, how the enemy can try to make emotion feel like progress, right? It's like, well, if I get off and I'm moving, I got to be getting there faster. And it's like, well, if I just stayed in traffic, even though we're sitting still here and waiting and just going 5 mile an hour, it's still faster to my destination than going all the way around, right?
Yeah. Hitting all the lights. All
Yeah.
the things.
And I was thinking about that from a hitting perspective because I was talking to my sister this week, and it's like, and I know I experienced this. I'll use my own personal experience. Was like my junior year, really good defender, couldn't hit a lick. Like I was struggle bus, like big time struggle bus. And I was we were playing what was Dixie State at the time. Now they're Utah Tech. They're in our conference, and we go in there. And two, I was playing the woe is me the first game, like face the Friday night guy. He's throwing like 95, really not like an 88 mile an hour slider. I go for 3 with 2 Ks, and I'm just like, well, if you would throw me against the number 4, not the number 1, I would get hits, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, Saturday comes, they sit me and they play this other kid, which actually ironically ends up being like one of my best friends, absolute sweetheart. But he takes my spot. So at the time, I'm just like, all right, bro,
This
like,
guy.
all right, we ain't cool
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah.
I was like, but he goes and plays second base, and then it was funny because literally the first inning, ball goes right between his legs. He gives up like 2 runs, just routine ground ball, like right between his legs, right?
Yeah.
And
Why'd you say his name, bro?
His name is Aiden Welch. If anybody, he's redheaded, lives in Seattle.
Let's drop some names. Let's drop some names then. This is we're gonna call this the Drop Name Podcast right now. We drop a name.
But yeah, so Aiden, because I absolutely love him. He's like a brother to me. But anyways, goes, and the first thing in my head, immediately, as you could imagine, was just like, see? See? It was like, he just gave up 2 runs. No matter what, is he going to put up 3 runs with his bat? It was like, that's the first thing that comes in my head, right?
Yeah.
But then, they finish the inning, and, again, like a God thing in my heart, I go up to him, and I just like pat him on the butt, and I'm like, hey, like we take ground balls together all the time. And I just tell him, I'm like, hey, field's playing this way. I was just like, second base is a little different. You're used to playing third and short, comes a little faster. I was like, so you're used to staying back, but the field plays where like you can't let it take a second hop, bro. It's like, even though you're playing second, like you got to push through it, right? And so I'm trying to give him some advice, right? And at the moment, I don't even know like, what this is going to do. Well, then fast forward our senior year, he's our starting third baseman. Like, no doubt, like starting third baseman. He was notorious for not being like statistically the best defender. But I didn't know, and now I look back in the big picture, it's like, well, me doing that and then also kind of like trying to mentor him defensively led to him helping me offensively, and like, because he was a really good hitter, was every year that I knew him. And so like it flipped where like he's now talking hitting with me, I'm talking defense with him. He's mentoring me, I'm mentoring him on different parts of our game. Then fast forward to the senior year, he's our starting third baseman. I'm playing short. It's like, we need him to play defense, right? And it's like, well, if I never would have taken that opportunity, who knows? He could have been horrific at third, and he ended up playing really, really good third base defensively that year. Maybe didn't look the part all the time. He loved to fall, but whatever. But he made all the plays.
Yeah.
And it was like looking back and reflecting, kind of like what you just said, is like celebrating other people's success. Like, well, maybe the point was for us to have a good senior year. Like, God knew that he had to help me offensively, I had to help him defensively, so that we could solidify. I was playing second base.
Yeah.
He was playing neither of those.
Some coach out there right now is yelling, culture.
Yeah.
Culture. That's what I'm talking about. Culture right there.
Well, and like to their point, I mean, I know that's broad, but to their point, like absolutely. And then we ended up playing the left side of the infield my senior year, his junior year. And it's like, well, that year we were both in and out of the lineup at second base. Like, not our best defenders, not our best hitters, like not our best players.
When you can get that shift to happen to when people talk about that culture in that way, and it's like how we create that. A lot of coaches create this like competition, but like a toxic way. Or when you can create a team where it's like, hey, in reality, we're just like, we're all trying to help each other to get better. Because I always say that too. Like sometimes, man, it's crazy, but you could have the 2 best players on the team and they want each other to be worse than the other one. And I always say like, hey, if you want to win at a high level, both of you need to hit.
Yeah.
All 5 of you, 6 of you, 7 of you need to really get after it. And then you guys need to help the guys at the bottom of the lineup and also your bench. You're trying to help each other. We're a team. We're trying to get each other all to really play well. Because if we can all really play well, man, like, again, we used to have this when I coached at Brighton High School a couple years ago. When I say couple, I'm aging myself again. It's actually quite a bit now, about 8 years ago or so. They had it written in the gym, quote, right? It's amazing what we can achieve when we don't care who gets the credit, right? And it's in the gym, and we used to see it all the time. And I used to bring it up when I would talk to the team. Like, it's amazing what we can achieve when we don't care who gets the credit, right? Like, if we win this game and I don't care who gets the credit, right? I don't care if I was the walk here. I don't care if I sat the bench the whole time and did, things, right? Like, even now, when I look back at like my last year that I played, it's like, yeah, we finished, in the nation, 5th in the nation, went to the World Series, all those stuff. I got like 16 at bats that year. Shoulder was torn in 3 places. Had one of the best hitters that, in the NAIA hit in front of me, playing the position in front of me, even to the guy I came off the bench, and I thought I had a chance at second base. And Kyle Yolande, you the man, bro, from back in the day. Shout out to you. Like, this guy came off the bench mid-season and just started hitting tanks, and then they just stayed in the lineup, just sitting there and just kept hitting tanks. And at the beginning of the year, he was a pitcher. We didn't think he was even going to play, and then this guy really locked in. And so you get to that where it's like every day we were just getting better. And man, if you don't get in that place where it's like, well, I want us to win, but not more than I want to play. I want us to win, but not more. I want that guy to have success, but not more than I want my success, right? And it's like, man, those are some nasty tie-ups that you might have that's going on, right? And also things that, again, on the same side of that, first off, therapy. Okay. Second off, also there's just understanding. And again, I don't mean that as a knock, like for real. Like we all have those ties. I had those ties. There's other things where if you want to play like that and have those freedoms, it's not just about just mimicking the behavior, but also feeling that actually, it's not an outward in process. It's an inward out. Like, my heart is in that place where I truly want that person to be successful. I truly want our team to succeed. And I know if our team's going to succeed, and also too, this other thing, the best teams have the smallest drop off between the starter and the backup, right? Good teams have great depth, right? So that's another thing as a coach when you're talking to your teams is understanding that, like, hey, I know we got a lot of really good players on the bench, and guess what? Even our starters, the guys that start the year, you know what? Not every guy's going to start hot, and we're going to need some guy to come off the bench and be the thing. We're going to need, at any point in the year, we're going to need new day, new hero. Like, we're going to need someone to step up. You know what? You might not be the best hitter in every situation. We used to have a guy on the bench that used to catch not very often. We'd come off. There was 2 times throughout our year that year. I remember he came up late innings. Dude, the guy struck out a ton, but he used to hit pumps to the pull side. Big lefty. We used to hit pumps to the pull side. So we put him in some big situations late in the game, and he hit a couple pumps and in those innings where we really needed a homer, right? Yeah. And so, again, that was also the other thing too as well. It's like, man, we can all contribute at a different time and in a different way. And if we get out of this, I need you to fail so that I can succeed, right? And in reality being like, no, hey, we all need to be getting better, because I never, look, okay, that person's a starter. I'm doing all these other things. I'm over there spending all this time complaining, all this other stuff. Nothing's going my way. I stopped training like I am. I'm in the wrong mindset. And all of a sudden that person breaks their arm. They break their leg. Something happens. They're injured. They go down for a couple weeks, and I got to step in. And now mentally I'm not even ready. And now there's such a fall off between them, because now I feel like I have to press and I'm trying to earn a spot and doing all these things, rather than being like, yo, I'm trying to pick my teammate up right now, right? My teammate in front of me Ks, or he strikes out, or he does whatever, right? And that's the spot in the lineup that I want to hit. And I'm like, see, like, I should be hitting there. Instead, if I get into the place like, hey man, I got you, baby. It's all good. Like, and you're a team, right? And you're pulling for each other, and you guys want each other's success, man, you can do some really great things. But if you get into the place where it's like, I need to play, and if it's not this, I'm out, right? Or I'm mentally checking out, and I'm not all these other things, or I got something right now. You know what? I know what I could say to this girl that really would pick her up, or this guy, and it would really pick him up. But instead, I'm so in my own mess, and I'm over here being pouty that I end up not doing that. Or good, I'm happy that they're failing and all this stuff. Those teams aren't going to win at the highest levels, because guess what? A team that is like that actually plays as a team is going to play way better than a team full of individuals that are all competing against each other and don't want each other. They're just trying to beat each other rather than win the game. Yeah.
Yeah. And with that too, is like, sometimes your job right now with your team and your situation is to just sit in traffic. Yeah. Sometimes it's just sit in traffic. Yeah. Right? That guy's got to develop. That girl's got to develop.
Work while you wait.
Right. And then too, you got to sit in traffic. And then sometimes that gives you perspective. Like, what that really did for me, not only was I helping him defensively, But I started looking at charts like I've never looked at before.
Yep.
And that really developed a skill from a hitting side. Like I never looked at charts. Everybody, my whole life, I just went up and hit. Like that was
Yep.
never a thing. Like I started looking at tendencies. I started looking at, where the catcher was setting up, where the pitcher was trying to attack me. Anybody really on my team. Like I just started looking at charts, and that became a really big part of my game moving forward. Is like I wanted to look at the chart now, right? And I believe that really helped me as a hitter.
For sure.
And so like sometimes too, like it's just to sit in traffic and to wait a little bit and like stop trying to be busy. Busy doesn't mean progress. Busy means busy, right? Progress means progress, right? And like I had to sit back, and like that developed a skill that in the big picture helped me develop. And I've seen that with hitters too, where like some of the best rounds that some of my hitters have had has been when I told them to like, hey, go sit over there for 5 minutes. Let's not take another round for 5 minutes. Then they come back in, they've reflected, they looked at their video. Sometimes they didn't do anything. Sometimes they just needed to cool down. And then they come back in, bang, bang,
Flush.
bang, right? And like that's a micro
Yeah.
example. Sometimes there's big examples, right? Where it's like, hey, like, for this weekend, for this week, for this month, for this season, right? Maybe this is where you got to sit in traffic and just be, right? Be where you're at and like work while you wait, like you said. And so, sometimes I think that is another analogy, I guess, that has really helped navigate some of those situations with hitters, I guess, is again, there's just different paths to get to where you're going. Like, again, if we go from your home to here, my home to here, her home to here, all to the farm, like they're all different paths, right? Like there's some overlap for probably you two, just knowing where you guys live, not for me, but it's like, they're all different paths to get here. Right. And sometimes you got to wait in traffic. Sometimes you got to get off and exit early and take that route. Sometimes, there's no traffic. Sometimes you're in the right lane. Sometimes you're in the left. Sometimes you're taking side streets. Sometimes you're on the freeway. Like same thing with their career.
Even me and her, I was going to say, adding to that analogy, right? We take similarly almost the same paths, but we're at different times in the day. So she faces different traffic than what I face on the way here. Like where I'm like, yo, I can take these streets, I can take these routes, I can do these other things. But because I notice it all the time, because all of a sudden I leave a little bit earlier and I'm like, yo, who are all these people in my way? You know, like I try to roll out of here at 5 o'clock, right? It's not normally something I do. I roll out here, I'm like, yo, why are all these people here? Like, because when I drive home usually and it's real late, there ain't nobody on the freeway,
there,
right? So I could, that's also a different thing. Someone could be on the same path as you at a different time, right? And at a different time in your business, at a different time in your career, at a different circumstances. You know what? Yeah, I played for that team too, but at the time we weren't as good as you guys were, right? This isn't like, let's take you take LSU, for example. LSU, the year they just won the World Series and they were stacked with all these guys. The whole team was getting drafted. That team was really good. You take the year Bryce Harper got drafted from CSN here. CSN was loaded, right? That's a different environment than it is if you go play there today. It's a different environment at LSU if you go play there last year compared to the year. Like, that it's a different time. Even though you might be on the same roads or at the same schools or at the, whatever, right? That's also, again, some nuances as well. It's like, hey, we're trying to make all these things like this is the same, but there's, there's all that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And then too, really like, the last point I had with that was going back to that podcast we talked about with the former CEO of Netflix, is he made a comment on there where there's a point, if just kind of like speed up and, fast forward, is like there's a point where basically him and his business partner, he was a CEO, the business partner was an angel investor. He came back and basically was like, I think I need to be the CEO and you need to be the COO and like step down, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, that was one of the toughest moments for me, is like, did I want this company to succeed more than I wanted to be the CEO, or did I want to be the CEO more? Like, and I had to, like, me and my wife went home, we finished a bottle of wine. I really had to think about it. I reflected,
I bet.
And he was like, and like, that was a big moment for him. Right. Yeah. And so like, going back to this and how I relate that to that is like, do you want to be the guy or the girl more than you want the team to win? Or do you want the team to win?
Yeah.
Right. And like, I made this comment.
You should want the best. You should want the best player on the field in that moment. And that's what I had to get to in my last year too, as well as being like, hey, I knew that I wanted that guy on the field more than I wanted to be on the field. Not more than I wanted to be on the field, but I wanted him in there because I knew that we were better if he played. Right. He was better than me. Right. And in those positions, like, bro, you're better than me. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to work. It doesn't mean that I'm not, keep trying to close that gap as much as I can. But I can also recognize that and be like, bro, you're just better than me, specifically right now.
Yeah.
Right now, you're the better player to be on the field right now.
Yeah. Well, and too, I'll use this example. Like the 2 high school dudes that we train to go to the same school, like one of them is got a lot of doubles right now. And it's like, there's this, the stigma of like, I want to be the 3 hole. Everybody wants to be the 3-4 hole, right? Because that's middle of the lineup, the power hitters, right? Yeah. And, I think he's batting
Carry
like
your
5th
bat
or
a little
6th.
different to the plate when you're 3 or 4.
Yeah, it's like, I think he's batting 5th or 6th, depending on the day or lineup that they put out there. And then like I made the comment to him, I was like, careful what you wish for. I was just like, you hit 3 hole, you get pitched to like 3 hole.
I know.
And he was like, he goes, yeah, now that you say that, I think I'm good with 6, dog. He's like, I'm chilling. And then like, the other kid that goes to that school.
That's exactly who it is. Yeah. That's exactly how he talks.
Yeah. And it was like, yeah, no, you're right. And so, but then we also trained the 3 hole, and he goes, yeah, let me tell you. He goes, you do not want to bat 3rd. He was like, I haven't bat 3rd my whole life. And he goes, bat 6, I promise, bro. And he goes, you bat 3rd next year, you'll know what I'm talking about. And
well, I remember being in the 8 hole and the same thing. You're just getting fed fastballs, and you got a higher average than the guy maybe in the 3 hole, and you're like,
I'm him.
Yo, what the heck? Like, I should be in the 3 hole, and then you get in the 3 hole, and your batting average drops 200 points, and you're like, yo,
8 it is.
Hey, I mean, I'm getting all these curveballs, and they're not throwing me anything straight, and then I'm in the dugout. God won't even throw me a fastball. Yeah, bro, you're in the 3 hole. He knows you could hit it over.
Exactly.
He knows you can pump him.
Yeah,
like, it's totally different.
Yeah, and so like just with that too, it's just just like again going back to all of it, it's just like perspective. Like you're having success right now, but also too like be where you're at, right? It's like keep crushing right now. You like that kid in particular, he's a junior, right? Go play, be in the position that they have you in, right? And next year you're going to be a senior, and you're probably going to bat 3rd, and then you'll learn why who's batting 3rd, who is a senior, right next to you in your hitting group is like, yeah, bro, enjoy 6 hole. It was just like, I'm getting pitched to different right now, and it's like, it's just like perspective, right? And then also too from his perspective, like the 3 hole, right? We have conversations like, hey, it's a privilege to get pitched to that way, right? If you were getting pitched fastballs, that would mean they think you suck, bro. It was like, be thankful that they don't think you suck,
for sure,
right? And so, just different conversations and just kind of like final point on that, right? Is like, maybe if the kid who's batting 6 was batting 3rd, maybe the team wouldn't be as good as they are. Maybe they would be better. You just don't know now unless you put them in that situation. But again, like, are you willing to be the 6 hole because that's what's best for the team?
Yeah.
Are you willing to be the 8 hole, 9 hole?
Also, a different perspective. One of the things I've told hitters now is I've seen some coaches, especially at the highest level, get pretty creative with their lineups. And so we start to think like, dude, why am I batting 7? Right? Like, I know I'm like, again, like 5, 6, like what's going on? Like, but sometimes one of the things I've seen play out, right, is like, okay, let's say your 3-4 hole is hitting everybody in. Okay, well, we got to start it up again. There's no reason to have another power guy right behind him and another power guy right behind him. So I've seen within lineups what they'll do too, is especially obviously we've seen a shift where sometimes the better hitter in the whole lineup will bat 2, right? So at least there's one person on in front of them, and then also they get a lot of at-bats and they come up with people on base all the time. But another dynamic too as well, let's say you're 3-4 sitting everybody in, and you look at the offensive strategy that you have as a whole team. Your 5-6 might be like a started up again, and then you need another power bat that might be a little bit later in the lineup, right? So we start looking at these numbers and go, oh, like it's little league, like, oh man, the worst hitters bat 7, 8, 9. But it's like, well, first off, your 9, when we used to say like, oh, it's your second leadoff and all the things, but like, no, a lot of times ends like especially in softball, right? They'll have like another slapper or somebody in the 9 hole to get it back started up again. And then again, your high average person right behind them, like there's a lot of 1 holes that are really, that are dynamic and they can do a lot of different things. And then also too, like I said, you can have your power hitter in the 2 hole that gets a lot of at bats, and then now they're hitting everybody in. So you got to have these dynamics of understanding that, sometimes you, instead of having that, right? 1, you can talk to your coach and maybe he can share these perspectives with it. But also 2, you need to be open to the idea that your coach might be trying to figure out the best lineup, right? He's not so worried about your status that you're getting from, oh, I'm batting in the 5 hole instead of the 7. But again, he's trying to win games. So how do we need to spread out the offense, right? So that we win more games and have a dynamic offense. So there's all these things, again, that we need to keep in perspective. And obviously too, the other thing is that, bro, if you're in the lineup,
you're in the lineup.
You're in the lineup.
Yeah.
You got a chance. You know what I'm saying? You got a chance to do this thing and make an impact right now, right? And do all those other things, right now in the game. So that's also a big piece. I think is huge from there. But
no, I mean, I think It's all good. It's all good because, everybody else, again, like you said, they're not all unicorns. A lot of people are going through the same things right now.
Yeah.
And so having these
Just different
conversations from
expressions.
like a player's perspective, a coach's perspective, and then also to players to hear our perspective as coaches of like what we're, again, like the lineup thing. That's a whole nother perspective that most players, again, how many players have actually put together a lineup and like failed and succeeded? Like almost none. You know what I mean? So it's like you don't understand what they're trying to do, and you can ask them. But I mean, there's some questions I can ask you, and you can tell me, and like I'd still be like, I don't know if I understand, because like again, it's like completely down another route of like whether it's business or whatever. Like again, like they just don't. They may not have that perspective. Like like you just said. I remember one summer I batted ninth. And I was batting like almost 400 that summer, and I was like, why am I batting ninth? Then my coach was like, well, you come up. Like a 9 hole comes up with 2 outs a lot. So, and I wasn't hitting a lot of doubles. It was just a lot of base hits, and like I could drop bunts down and stuff. So he was like, you're getting on base. So I put a guy that consistently hits a lot of doubles and triples and home runs at leadoff. So at the very least, if you get on, I know you're going to get on, steal second because you're fast. And then that guy hits a double, like we just scored a run, like that's huge. Or if you get out, we start back up with our leadoff who hits a lot of doubles, like he's a stud. Well, then we just let off with a double. Like that's a great
Or
flip.
you're on first with some speed. He hits a double. You score.
I could
from
still
first.
score.
Yeah,
and right. And like
creates a different.
Again, like I didn't think like that. And then he was like, yeah, you could bat probably 5th for us right now, or maybe even like 4th, depending on how the lineup was. Like, yeah, you could, but just the way that the team's structured, like I think it's better for you to bat 9th right now. And it's like, I view you as one of our top 5 hitters this summer, but the lineup's best with you batting 9th. Like you have a ton of runs scored. You lead our team this summer in runs scored because of how it's structured,
Yeah.
And so just a lot of different perspectives and stuff like that. And I think it's good for players and coaches to kind of, hear all the different dynamics and stuff. But yeah, go back to you.
Yeah, that's good. All right, let me pray us out here. You know what I'm saying? Let me pray us out. All right, dear Father God, thank you so much for having us sit down and finally knocking out a podcast. God, we're thankful for all that, and we just ask that you continue to look after and all the hitters and everybody that is going through all the ups and downs and the journey and everything that you have from God. And we just ask that you continue to soften their heart and open them up to different perspectives and for your glory, God, and also just let your love flow through them and help them have the eyes that you have. Let them have your perspective. Let them have your ears. Let them be the arms and feet for you, God, and continue to just work in their lives. And we just pray all these things in Jesus' mighty name.
Amen.
Amen. Well, until next time, Farm System out.